Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a few of the opportunities that we are currently searching for. We have a number of things happening in Dallas: litigation, transactional, white collar, trial work, everything. So please reach out if that's of interest to you. In Austin, family law, commercial and insurance litigation, Tarrant County, family law and corporate real estate. In Houston, personal injury, as well as insurance defense. San Antonio, we've still looking at commercial bankruptcy as well as commercial litigation. And in Tyler, IP litigation and commercial litigation. Actually, in that is based Tyler, but could be potentially remote. So if you're in another city in Texas, you could potentially make that work, as well as a transactional opportunity there in Tyler as well. So there are opportunities all over the state in a variety of practice areas. And if that's of interest to you or someone that you know, please have them get in touch. Daniel at varsitysearch.com. All right, today we are in Houston, where our guest is Marty Sadler. Marty is an insurance litigator with Litchfield Cavo, where he practices first-party property insurance coverage, bad faith claim litigation, and catastrophe litigation, including commercial and residential hurricane, wind, and hail losses. Marty's been rated an AV preeminent lawyer by Martindale-Hubbell every year since 2010, included in the best lawyers in America since 2008 for insurance law, and listed as a best lawyers in Texas and a Texas super lawyer. And so we are excited to talk with him. Let's hop into our conversation with Marty Sadler on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Marty Sadler joins us right now. Marty, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Well, I'm looking forward to visiting with you. It's been a long time since we had a chance to see each other between the pandemic and everything else. And I've switched jobs. You've switched jobs in the intervening time.
That's for sure. Yep, that's for sure. That's the way it is. Yep.
That's the way it goes. But, tell us a little bit about your firm and your practice, and give us a sense of what all you do.
Okay. Well, the firm I'm at now has 22 offices across the nation. So we're a varied law firm, and I would consider us to be a full-service law firm. Mm-hmm. In Houston, we're largely oriented toward insurance defense practice. Most of the partners and associates in the Houston office do third-party work, but I do first-party work, but mostly property stuff, hurricanes, storms, fires, that type of thing. And I've been doing that for quite a while now. But that's generally what we do. We've got about 15 lawyers about 12 lawyers in the Houston office, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And so we've seen more of this, right, over the last 5 to 8 years, large national and international firms that are wanting to foothold in the Texas market, right? And especially down in Houston, where things are just growing like crazy.
Well, that's right. And, because especially Texas is really a significant hotspot for storms, not just hurricanes and tropical storms, but Texas gets some hailstorms that everybody else would be happy to avoid. So they need Texas lawyers for that.
Sure, absolutely. And we can talk about COVID separately from this, but aside from that, is there anything going on, or what's going on in the insurance world or in your practice area that people are talking about or that?
Well, there is. I mean, a lot of it stays the same, but this past May, I want to say, the Texas Supreme Court issued a new opinion in Hinojos case, which is an opinion relating to payment of claims after an appraisal. It used to be pretty much given in Texas that if you pay a claim promptly after an appraisal award is issued, that you avoid all of the statutory delay interest penalties.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court in May really took that away. So even if there was never any litigation filed or any disagreements between the insured and the carrier, but they decided to go through an appraisal to try to complete figuring out how much is owed, then once the insured receives the payment, and now we're seeing a lot of lawsuits designed to just capture the past due, the penalty interest and attorney's fees on that. And so since that's basically a strict liability statute,
right?
That means that if you've got a delay, you owe. It's sort of like period, and that's a problem on my side of the docket.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it sounds like it. Sure.
Yeah. I've had some ideas for a long time that the statute only penalizes the insurance carrier, but I see a lot of claims where, especially when a lawyer gets involved for the insured, there are delays on the insured's side. But if Hinojos is applied exactly as written, then whether the insured delays or the insurer delays, the insurer pays the penalty for that time period.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would think that it may be down the road, but I would think that somebody's going to have to fix that a little bit, and maybe some amendments to the statute by the legislature.
Yeah, some legislature stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, good deal. And then as far as COVID is concerned, and we're talking here on September 29th, 2021, for people listening later, what's the current situation for you all in terms of just how you're operating right now in kind of the office and the way you're interacting with each other and with clients and so forth, and then also just how the courts and the litigation is happening with the cases that you're managing and all of that. What's kind of the latest as it pertains to COVID?
Well, that's a big question, Daniel.
That's right. We have 28 minutes left, so and a lot more to cover.
To start off with, my firm has 22 offices, like I said, and so we have 22 different COVID situations, basically.
Right.
Chicago's different from Atlanta, different from Houston, different from somewhere in Florida, for example. So every office is doing basically their own managed process for how we get back to the office, that type of thing.
Yep.
The Houston office currently is operating on a system of people decide how much time they want to be in the office and how much time they want to work remotely.
Okay. Yep.
We have found that, especially for lawyers, you can be just as productive at home and eliminate that commute time.
Sure.
So we're not pushing people to get back into the office. And in fact, I haven't been back in the office except one time since I left the office in March of 2020. So
that's unbelievable, isn't it? Just to think about it. Like, I know sometimes we get a little numb to that. But if you really stop and think about your entire life practicing law in the office for, then now these last 18 months, one time you've been in the office, that's just amazing.
Yeah, and I was there because a federal court judge ordered an in-person Rule 26 conference. So
so it took a federal judge to get you in there.
That's right.
That's the only reason. Otherwise, you'd have a perfect 18-month streak.
Yeah, and I've had very few in-person hearings with the courts since then.
Yeah,
a couple with one of the judges here in the Southern District on a case that has recently settled. But then more recently, I had a hearing up in Dallas in a federal court up there. And I think the federal courts are ready to move more into in-person hearings, but I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah.
For now, it looks like, for the most part, if you want to appear remotely, most judges are letting that happen. Mm-hmm. And I have not had a trial since COVID started.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's unfortunate because it did feel like, in maybe the late spring, early summer, when kind of the first wave of vaccinations were happening, as well as we didn't have yet the Delta variant creeping up, that we were kind of moving towards, okay, can we get trials going again? Can we get courthouses open again? Get things going back in person? And then everything kind of just went off the rails mid and late summer. And I think we're kind of back in no man's land, it feels like, in terms of when those things can happen again, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I was very much ready to go back to work in the next week or so when the Delta variant really started to take hold. And that caused me to rethink what I was doing. And so I've been working remotely that whole time. And so far that's good for me, but we'll see what happens. There are issues that I need to address because I'm not in the office. And so I'm going to have to figure those out sometime soon, but we may get to that kind of thing later in the chat.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, assuming if and when we finally do get beyond COVID, how do you see things progressing in the way that we work as lawyers, at least in your firm and in your Houston office there? Do you feel like this remote working and working from home and remote hearings and that kind of thing will at least in some way be part of how we do things moving forward? Or you think we'll go back mostly to the way things were before? How do you kind of see that shaking out?
Well, I'm just one lawyer on the ground, but from where I sit, I kind of see a lot of it will continue. Mm-hmm. I personally expect that I'll go back to some sort of a hybrid arrangement, and that'd probably be the rest of my career.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days in and 2 or 3 days out. And I may manage those days in by what has to happen and what some of the associates who are working for me need my physical presence for example. So I think it's going to be the long haul. Yeah.
Yeah. And no, I think that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in the commercial real estate business because I think a lot of law firms are going to reduce their physical footprint by substantial amounts.
Yeah, right. And not just law firms. I mean, I think a lot of companies and a lot of businesses that are using mostly information workers that can do things by computer and laptop and a Wi-Fi connection, I mean, are going to have to look, right, at their footprint, especially in high rent, high cost areas. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. In all of our major cities here, certainly real estate is a huge cost element of operating the practice. Absolutely. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely going to have to get looked at. Well, and then the other part is, I don't know if you've seen this or had any, or maybe have some thoughts on this. I mean, I think too, one of the things that'll be interesting is, while we can replicate so many things by remote and by video and all these things, it will be interesting to kind of get some, I'll be interested to see research and stuff like that years from now about what we lose in terms of the interpersonal connections and relationships and from not being in the office. And I'm sure there's going to be some element of that, and we just don't know kind of exactly how much or exactly what. But because I think that there's got to be something that's lost in that. It's supposed to be worth the trade-off, but it has to be taken into account as well. And just also in terms of being intentional moving forward about how to try to mitigate some of those losses and still, bring those relationships together and making sure that they're strong and not just completely left to the remote world the way we're doing it now. But I don't know. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big deal because, I was a communication major as an undergraduate and through my master's degree and through some PhD work also. And from what I know, the nonverbal element of communication is more significant than the verbal element of communication. Right. And I've certainly seen it in depositions. I lose some of the interaction with a witness in depositions. And like I say, I haven't done it at a trial yet, but I would imagine a trial is going to be significantly difficult to manage. What's the jury seeing? What are they thinking? How am I affecting this witness? How is this witness directing me to go some other place? So I think it's going to be pretty big.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, well, let's switch topics and talk about, I want to get some practical advice for the young lawyers in the audience that are listening, and want to hear from you about advice that you received as a young lawyer getting started, maybe something that was shared with you that has continued to stick with you and you've remembered throughout your years of practice. What's maybe something that you learned as a young lawyer that you would think would be important and helpful to pass along?
Okay, so I'm not sure it's so much as anything someone told me as what I sort of figured out on my own.
Sure.
But by the reactions I got from the partners I worked for, in some ways they were telling me this. And what I would say is attention to detail is the thing that I found to be the most salient element for success as a young lawyer. When I started out, we did personal injury and wrongful death, largely construction site claims, and we often would bring wrongful death claims for a family and jump out of the workers' comp statute and just try to get recovery on gross negligence, right?
Yeah.
So when you're trying to convince somebody to pay at a mediation on a specific theory of gross negligence for a wrongful death, you've got to own the details of that case, and you've got to be able to put the facts together that way. I think that's been important for my whole career, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so just making sure to be on top of all those details. Yeah, absolutely. Is there something that you've learned more recently, or maybe you learned later on in practice that you wish someone would have taken you aside and given you the heads up on a little earlier, or maybe you had to learn something the hard way at some point?
Well, one thing is, this is sort of sideways to success as a lawyer, but learning how to manage up in your professional relationship. I had no idea how important that was when I was a young lawyer. I thought I just go to work, I manage the details, I get the work done on time, and everything's going to work out for me. But there are all kinds of pitfalls in an office situation where if you're not learning how to manage up, then you may find yourself on the outside, not a favored associate, and maybe you have to look for another job even sometimes. And I just had no idea about that, Daniel.
Yeah. So, and frankly, I'm not sure that everybody listening would necessarily know what that means. Manage up is definitely a term of art, and one that is a kind of management term and a business term. So tell me what you mean by that, so that we can help these folks understand what that means and what that practically looks like as a young lawyer in an office with their partners.
For me, generally that means that you don't just react to the things that the higher-ups tell you to do. You need to be able to do some simple things like explain that, well, I've got 7 projects on my desk right now, and I can work that in, but we need to figure out how it's going to fit in. So I don't get caught in a bind where somebody's project doesn't get completed, and then I'm the one who's to blame for that. But right. So that's a simple thing about managing up, to just make sure that as you're taking in assignments, you manage how they go into your docket by telling the lawyers who are bringing you that task how it's going to fit in. And if you don't do that, you're not going to make it happen, I don't think. So that's a simple example, but
yeah. And I think, when I think about that too, and managing up and how it's applied across industries and in different facets. Yeah, it really is that, taking the lead with whoever your supervisor or supervisors are in, and making sure that that I think that you understand what all is being asked of you. You understand the time constraints that things are under, because some things may need immediate responses, some may not need immediate responses, and if you don't find out those things, then you're kind of lost in terms of how to prioritize the projects that you have. And so part of managing up is being able to coach in a appropriate way your partner to be able to share those things with you, so that you can set an expectation and a standard moving forward, right? That going forward, that they'll tell you when things are due and what needs to be the priority, that kind of thing. But it does take a little bit of subtlety and a little bit of awareness of kind of each partner's personality, and that kind of thing. So it's not an easy thing necessarily to learn, but I do think it's good to have in mind, and to also watch others. Maybe a little bit more senior associates look at how they do that with their partners as well, to kind of learn from examples of others and kind of see the dynamics of other relationships in the office that look healthy, productive, and that are moving in a positive way.
Well, I would say, and talk to them, talk to the older associates, and what do you do that makes this manager or this partner happy? How do you manage the work you're getting from her and the work you're getting from him? And those kinds of things are important. And as you get further up in the organization, then you've got to really be concerned about how do you manage up about expectations for client development, for compensation reasons, and for just how you manage your own time in the office, for example. So it's a broad thing, but each piece of it is going to be very specific, and it's going to be about taking the work that's coming in or the obligations that are coming in and manage how they fit in your individual practice and your practice across other people you work with. So,
that's great. In fact, what I'll do too is, because I'm almost positive we are almost to 100 episodes, and I think this is the first time managing up has been mentioned, and I'm so glad that you mentioned it. Sometimes I worry that after 100 episodes we've hit everything and multiple times, so I'm always super excited when we have a new concept and a new idea. But because of that, I'm going to go out after we're done, and when we put this episode out, I'll put some links in the show notes to just some resources around what managing up can look like, and some tips and tools on how to do that. Because I think that it is something that needs that great extra level of study to understand it. And so we haven't talked about it before. I want to do that for sure. That's awesome. And so also, then as you think about some of the associates that you've worked with over the years, and that you've either overseen or just observed and trained in any capacity, worked with associates, especially those first few years of practice, what are some things that, one or two things that they can do to stand out in a positive way among the partners, or things they can do to impress those that are the partners in the firm?
Well, I would start with the first thing is, as important as it is for you as an associate to manage up, I really appreciate it as a partner when I get feedback from the associate telling me how that's going to fit into the workload they already have, because I don't know. And so that makes a big difference for me. But the second thing, and I think the biggest thing for me, is push to product. I can't revise a motion that you haven't given me. And I can't revise something that you only give me a handful of what we need. So push to product, get it to me, and then I can do something with it. I think that's a hugely important thing.
Yeah. So, and when you say that, because we've talked to, I would say a number of folks here that have said, when you are completing a written product assignment of some kind, and you're then presenting it to your partner, whoever assigned it for you, how important it is that it's, for the most part, complete, in the sense of it doesn't have errors, it doesn't have typos, it doesn't have issues with it, doesn't have blank spots. It for the most part has everything that it would need to. If it had to be filed at 5:00 and it's 4:50, you could stamp it, get it in, file it in. When you say push to product, then because you're wanting to get it in front of you so that you can start making revisions on it and getting things moving in terms of editing and other ideas on it, how do those things work together? Because obviously the to get something into a form that is almost or near complete and error-free takes longer, takes more time than just getting kind of the basics of whatever it is down on paper. So how do those work together, if at all? Maybe they don't. I don't know.
Well, I figured that I want to see it twice. I want to see it once when you've got the stuff on paper, and I don't need to see the citations are exact or that kind of thing, but I need to see that you have citations for what you're going to be doing, and I want that. But then I want to get it back to you so that you can return it to me in this much more polished state that you're talking about, so that I can turn it around on filing day and we're going to file a quality product.
I see. Yeah. So essentially, that's almost like kind of a two-step approach. And also important to that, and we've kind of hinted around it a couple of times already, is understanding the calendar, because you can't provide that first draft that's going to be looked at by you and revised if the turnaround time is 2 days or something like that. I mean, that has to come much earlier, so that you've got the time to build in to do the edits, and the associates got the time to go back, implement those, and then polish and get the citations all right and everything else. And so there has to be an allocation of time for each of those steps. And that just goes back to what we were talking about before, the managing up and understanding what's needed and how each partner works and all of that. And so that's super helpful, I think, for people to hear that and know that they need to understand how, is it 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps, 4 steps that a partner likes to have in the middle of assign the project to, we're filing this thing with their associate. And that might look different, firm to firm, partner to partner.
Right. You've got that exactly right. And so you may have to do it differently with different partners in your office. But for me, I'd like to see it a minimum of twice. And so we need to manage the calendar so that can happen.
Yeah. So, you were mentioning earlier in the conversation about expectations around business development. I think you mentioned it as an example of something that you might have discussions with your partner about. But how do you think about business development in terms of, for a young lawyer who's really still learning how to be a lawyer and how to perfect or get really good at their craft? How do they start either building in business development into their daily or weekly or monthly time, if at all, and how should they be thinking about that?
Well, I mean, you're right. First of all, learn how to be a lawyer. You got to do that. But times are different now than when I was a young lawyer. You don't have to be 50 years old to meet the first person who can give you a meaningful case to work anymore.
Right.
So if you're a young lawyer and you connect with people through the State Bar Association and the different divisions and different committees, but also through your local bar association and maybe even in your neighborhood, you'll run into people that can bring you work that way. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can do as a young lawyer.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And we see that. Good deal. So, another topic I want to talk to you about is hiring and recruiting. When you're going through a process of hiring a lawyer, and I'm thinking now, a lateral hire of an associate that's been practicing for a couple of years or so, what are some of the things that you're looking for on paper, on the resume, on a transcript, on a cover letter, when you're just kind of reviewing documents and deciding whether or not this is someone you want to take the time to actually, spend time on an interview with? What are some of the things, positively or negatively, that you're looking for to filter those candidates down? Okay,
so a new hire, I frankly like to see that they've got some judicial experience as a clerk or whatever. So they've been in a courthouse. For lateral hires, I want to see that they've been doing things that that show me that they're progressing as a lawyer. And if you're actually looking at written product, then you need to send a written product, a writing sample that is complete and accurate and doesn't have spelling errors and things like that, because we don't want to spend time changing those things. But if you're talking about when you are meeting them and talking to them, for me, the biggest thing is poise. They've got to show that they are comfortable and confident when things change on them. So I look for that a lot.
Yeah. So how on that point, on the area of demonstrating poise, how are how do you go about doing that in an interview setting? Is that something that just in the course of conversation you can kind of get a feel for that, or do you have either specific interview questions or things that you throw at them to kind of try to test that and see how they respond? What's a way that you evaluate that level of poise that you're looking for?
Well, a lot of it comes from just seeing them and hearing them and how they talk. I think that's easy, but I will also ask questions that they may not really expect. Like I might ask an interviewee, what do you bring to this firm to make the firm better? So I want to know how you're going to make us better. And then a lot of them haven't thought about how they're going to make the firm better. They think about how they're going to develop in the firm. And so you can get some very different answers to a question like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point that you just made. And I think it's true. And I talk with candidates a lot before interviews. And this is one of the things that we talk about is how to communicate your the value that you bring to the firm, but also your desire to help the firm be better. I think a lot of times candidates go in and talk about why the firm would be good for them in terms of growing their experience and their skills. And that's great. Like this should be a mutually beneficial relationship between the candidate or the lawyer and the law firm. That's absolutely true. But so much of it tends to focus then on how they're going to benefit. They don't think about talking about their experience in a way that will benefit the firm's clients, and how they can help and plug in and be part of the team, and all of the things that can improve the firm's stature and the firm's relationship with its clients and so forth. And so I think I just don't think a lot of them think of it that way. And so it's not something that's super hard. Once they think about that, they can come up with several things to share along those lines, but it's just a framework of thinking that oftentimes isn't there. And so that makes sense that would throw them off.
Yeah. So I think the interviewee has to know that they're entering an entire package, that it is a symbiotic relationship, or should be, and you should be able to tell me how you're going to make me better when I'm going to hire you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think too, and we talk about this, on the show a decent amount, is, that in a mega firm, and I know you have a really kind of a small firm office feel probably within the larger firm environment. So I would kind of, in this dynamic, I would think that's more of like why this is really important. But, if you're going into a 12-person office or a 16-person office, how you're going to be relating with those other people in your office is super important. If you're going into an office that has 800 lawyers in the building, maybe it's not as important. And so the interviews don't have to be as focused on that. And so,
right. Sure.
It does matter what kind of culture and the size of the office is.
You're exactly right. I agree with that.
Okay. The last thing that want to talk about is work-life balance, because it's something that gets brought up quite a bit among particularly the millennial and then now Gen Z lawyers, especially, that are looking for a larger life outside of work, many of them. How do you see that progressing these days? And it's kind of a weird time with COVID, because we're kind of getting a dose of what the flexible work environment, which is part of that, a little part of that anyway, would look like. But in terms of just being a lawyer in a law firm environment, in a service industry where lots demanded of time by clients in order to be good and be successful and maintain a practice, how do you think about work-life balance in this era and moving forward for these young lawyers?
Well, I think it's a hard question, because when you work as a lawyer, you can always work longer and you can always work harder. And so you can get yourself consumed in being a lawyer. And then if you get to the point where you forget that you're a human being first and a lawyer second, then I think you have problems.
Yeah.
And I think there was a little more attention to that 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. It seems to have waned some, but I'm still in the viewpoint that even though you're lawyers, you come to work so you can go home and live a life outside of your work. And I think that's the focus you have to have. And so I think you have to find your ways to maintain your personness so that you don't just bring a lawyer home to the wife and kids or the husband and kids. And,
right.
So
they don't always love us as lawyers, do they?
No, and I think largely lawyers are not really given a high score on personability and stuff like that. So
yeah, right. That's right. All right. Well, Marty, we've covered a lot of ground, but is there anything that we haven't touched on yet or maybe anything that we didn't go as deep on that you would want to share before we wrap up here?
I guess one thing I would say is that if you're an associate, the best thing that you can do to improve your career is to make yourself valuable, even indispensable to the partner or partners you work for. That's going to increase the amount of contact that you're going to get on files. It's going to increase your chance to have client contact. It's going to increase your chance to do depositions and to pull more of the laboring oar on various cases into your workspace so the partner can focus on the things that the partner would prefer to focus on. But you're going to improve as a lawyer that way, and you're going to become the lawyer that gets the better assignments, I think. And so make yourself indispensable to the partners you work for. That's the best thing you can do to improve your career, I think.
No, that's great. Absolutely. All right. Well, before we do our rapid fire questions, I do have one last thing for you that I didn't prep you for intentionally. And that is, I want you to tell us about your art, because I love seeing your art on LinkedIn and maybe other places. That's where I always see it. But I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit about how you got started in that, what kind of art. Tell a little bit about that story.
Well, okay. So I'm mostly focused on photography and more particularly on bird photography.
Yep.
And I sort of started years ago. We'd take the kids down to a weekend vacation at the beach. Surfside was where we used to go all the time. And I started noticing especially the pelicans.
Yep.
And the way that they'll fly in formation and those kinds of things. They're such odd looking birds, but they're so graceful in the air.
Yeah.
And that sort of just stuck with me. And I've been doing bird pictures for a long time now. And a lot of times I try to get essentially the perfect photograph. And other times I try to get an image out of the photo that does certain things for me. So it might be through blurring or through colorization or reduced color, those kinds of things. But that's the heart of it is I love to take the bird pictures, and it in some ways keeps me whole.
Yeah.
If I don't get out to take bird pictures, say to Anahuac Wildlife Refuge or something like that, very often, I can notice myself feeling more tense and more uncomfortable, and so when I go out and take the pictures, that helps me relax. When I sit down and manage the photographs on my computer, that sort of puts me right back where I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I share the photographs, that really, again, makes me feel more like a whole human being. And I like to let people see what I do.
Yeah, that really is. So I didn't connect it earlier to the work-life balance question, but that is a work-life balance
it absolutely
component
is, yes.
for you. Absolutely.
Yeah,
well, they're
absolutely.
spectacular. And then in particular, as a lawyer would do, the captions on them are, I think, what make the photographs a lot of times in the way that you describe and title them. I always get a kick out of those. They're great. And so I don't know have you always done that as part of this, or was that something that came later?
No, that really started when I started just posting my pictures, and somebody just told me one time, go ahead and post your pictures on LinkedIn and Instagram and that type of thing. And so then I started doing a caption with them, and I used the caption to sort of give the reader a chance to figure out what I'm seeing and why this photograph touched me or whatever. So that's what those are for.
Well, we will put some of these images in to the post that goes with this and link to some other places so people can see it, because I think it's great. And
you're welcome to use any of them that you see that you like, or if you want me to send you some, I can do that too.
That's great. All right. So let's finish with our rapid fire questions. If you're ready, we'll hop into those.
I'll do it.
All right. Name one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Poise. We already talked about
that. Yeah, we did got poise. Yeah. Poise. What habit has been key to your success?
Attention to detail. So we talked about that too.
Consistency. Here we go. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Well, did you forget I'm a curmudgeon?
Right.
I guess my favorite app is probably I like Instagram because I get a chance to share things instantly that way. But as far as working on the computer, mostly I'm stuck in Word.
Sure. So. Yeah. Well, we may have already covered this too. What would you list first on the interest section of your resume?
Well, see, you're right. So I guess I'm really a narrow track person, but it would be photography and bird pictures in particular. Yeah.
So, if the Pelican Brief is your favorite legal movie, then we've really hit consistently all the way down through here. But I will ask your favorite legal movie. I don't think we've talked about this yet. So
we haven't, and the Pelican Brief is not at the top.
Okay, good.
I'm an old guy. To Kill a Mockingbird is still my favorite legal movie. But I'll never leave the room if My Cousin Vinny is on the TV. So,
it's funny. Those two get mentioned together, I think, a lot of times because you think of the just the way that To Kill a Mockingbird presents the lawyer and kind of its most idealistic form, and then My Cousin Vinny gives you all of the comedic components and all the things there, and pretty tracks pretty. Pretty close to procedure and evidence, maybe better than most. I know of law professors that use My Cousin Vinny in their classes and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, it seems to be a lawyer's favorite for that reason.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Well, Marty, thank you so much for taking time to be on the show with us. Really appreciate you doing it, and wish you and your firm all the best as you move forward.
Thanks, Daniel. Good luck with your podcast, and I hope things keep going well for you.
All right, my thanks again to Marty Sadler for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me, Daniel@varsitysearch.com. Likewise, please do get in touch if you're interested in any of the opportunities that we mentioned at the top of the show, or if you just want to visit more generally about what the market's doing and what options might be out there for you. Would love to do that as well. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.